going on, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. So now we're on episode 18 of the Killin It Resurrection series. So those of you that have no idea what the Killin It Resurrection series is, well, you need to go back and watch all them videos so you know what's going on. But a quick little rundown of what it is. I run the Killin It Mega Truck. It's 2010 GMC 2500 HD, big old mega truck on 23 130s. Well, last year, the beginning of last year, ended up blowing the Duramax engine in that thing.
Killing it, bro.
I killed it. It's killed. So throughout the past year, it's been actually 406 days that we spent rebuilding this truck. We did everything from putting a brand new drag racing Socal diesel twin turbo Duramax 1000 horsepower engine in it. We rebuilt the axles. We put new stuff in the interior, put a roll cage in it, new cooling system. We redid the front bumper, a new front winch. We did all kinds of super bitchy stuff to the truck. It is motherfucking sick. It's so badass, bro. You have no motherfucking idea if you ain't been watching the channel. So if you are interested in it, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button down there in my channel name. That way you get notified when I upload any other videos. And you can go ahead and watch these videos at your leisure and get caught up to speed on what's going on with the Killin It Mega Truck. And while you're at it, go ahead and hit that like button at the bottom of the screen too. Bam! Freaking smash that thing. So anyways, in this episode, what we're going to be working on is the cooling system for the Killin It Mega Truck. Now, I kind of touched on it in some of the last episodes of the Killin It Resurrection, but in this episode, we're actually going to go through and we're going to fabricate this entire cooler rack system. So, what is a cooler rack system? And no, I'm not talking about a drink cooler. I'm not talking about one that you're going to throw your Bud Lights in. Those, you still drinking those these days. Man, what a weird time in the world we're living in these days, huh? Oh, but anyways, what I mean by a cooler rack. So, we completely have revamped the way this truck cools itself for multiple reasons. First and foremost, let's kind of go back a little bit to the old engine. The old engine had a factory turbo on it, and I was running, when I was really getting on it, I was running about 32 pounds of boost. Now, as if you guys know anything about boost, once you compress the air, the more air you compress, you're absolutely getting more dense air into the engine, you're getting more air into the engine. So as long as you got fuel to go with that air, you get more power. With 31 PSI of boost and a little bit of horsepower we were running, it was enough that it was overheating my old engine all the freaking time. And I'm pretty sure that's what contributed to its final demise. Well, this new engine has got two turbos on it because it's a twin or a compound turbo system. So we're getting a lot more boost. They're saying it's going to get, I haven't seen it yet because I haven't been running the hot tunes yet, but they're saying it will get upwards between 70 and 80 PSI of boost, which is a ton more boost. All that air, the more pressure you get, the hotter that air gets. As you compress air, the air molecules rub against each other, and the more they rub against each other, the hotter they get, so then you start getting hot air intake temperatures. The hotter the air is that's going into the engine, the hotter the engines are going to get, which can cause some problems. Once your engine starts overheating enough, then you start getting issues like warped heads, you crack pistons, you get all kinds of issues. It's not a good sight. So we want to try to keep this engine as cool as possible. You want it to be warm enough that you get the lubricity of the oil and everything running through the engine, but cool enough that you don't start to have those fatiguing issues with the materials that the engine is made out of and the different internal parts of the engine. So, with me so far? Now, you got to also keep in mind, though, this new engine is a whole different animal than my old engine. This new engine's got a lot more badass internals, from everything from crank, rods, head studs, pistons, everything. It's definitely a next level diesel engine, but I still want to do whatever I can to try to keep it all cool. So we've been thinking about those for literally the past year. That's why y'all see once I start getting into the filming that we did, you'll see that I actually started filming this stuff like the middle of 2022. And now we're the beginning or about a quarter of the way through 2023. So it's almost a year later. So it's been definitely a process in the making. Now, keeping that background information in mind on how I used to overheat all the time with the little bit of boost that I was running, now bring us to this new fully built Socal diesel engine. Again, these internals are next level. There's a whole next level engine. But I want to do everything I could preventatively to keep this engine from overheating, because overheating, no matter how badass your engine is, overheating is never a good thing. So that will bring me to the couple things that we've done on this new setup to try to keep that overheating to a very, very minimal or hopefully non-existent whatsoever. First thing we did was that new radiator. I explained that a lot in the last video because we actually, in the time-lapse process, we had just got to that stage of it. We just installed the new aftermarket radiator and the new aftermarket intercooler. So the intercooler is a Mishimoto intercooler. It's a drop-in intercooler you can get anywhere online. It's a Mishimoto intercooler for a GMC 2500 HD truck. The radiator is a whole nother animal in itself, and I kind of explained a lot in the past video. But one thing I didn't touch on in that last video that's kind of a key characteristic of that new radiator is that new radiator is all coolant. Your factory GMC radiator, about 1/3 of it is taken up with fluid that's for your transmission. Your transmission fluid gets cooled through about 1/3 of that radiator. And then the other 2/3 of it is what you're running your coolant through. Well, with this new radiator, we completely eliminated that whole cavity for transmission fluid. Instead, we're going to cool the transmission fluid with a whole separate cooler that we're going to put on this cooler rack that we're about to fabricate. Now, so that's what one cooler is going to be for this rack. Another cooler is that this rack's going to hold a total of 3 coolers. So one's for the transmission fluid. The second one is going to be for the power steering fluid. Now that'll be a whole separate Killin It Resurrection episode, probably come out in the next couple videos. We're running a whole new power steering pump for this truck, and I'll get into why I'm doing that in that video. But I do have to have a cooler for this new power steering pump because of the characteristics of it. Now the third cooler is going to be an engine oil cooler. Now I'm not totally convinced that we're actually going to use it. I'm going to have it there, probably cap it off, and then if we ever start having some overheating issues, if I notice that heat is a problem with this new motor, then I'll go ahead and plumb it in with the oil cooler that's on the side of the engine that the oil filter screws onto. I'll go ahead and plumb this secondary cooler in line with that to try to cool the engine oil down, to try to keep my engine temperatures down. But for right now, I don't even think we're going to use that third cooler. We're just going to be using the first two, the power steering and the transmission. So the coolers themselves are going to be Duramax Hypercool coolers that I'm getting from Daniel Roberts over at Mid-Arc Off-Road. He's a dealer for Duramax coolers, and that's who we're actually going to be getting these through. And he's the one that kind of steered me in this direction on how I could achieve some of this cooling capability. But they're pretty badass coolers. They're self-contained units where they just got bungs welded onto them, where you can put any kind of fitting you want to be able to run your fluid into it. Ideally, you want to use an AN fitting so you can run AN lines. But the coolers, they've got their own fan attached to them with a fan shroud. So you really just got to run your fluid to it, and then you've got to run a 12-volt lead to it. It's pretty much all you got to do to be able to have an entire self-contained cooling unit. So I'm gonna have all three of those coolers on a rack. As I said, I started filming this stuff like over a year ago, so that's kind of how this video is gonna start out, where I was first kind of mocking up on the truck where these coolers are gonna go, or if I can even fit three of them onto the truck. Now, hindsight, we're a year and a half later, the coolers are on the truck, so obviously it all worked out. But y'all are gonna be able to follow along on this video, the entire process as we started making this dream become a reality. So that's where we're gonna get started right now. You'll notice, beginning, we're starting out where the truck is actually at my house before it even went over to the Mad Scientist home laboratory for the entire revamp that we did. So that's where the video is gonna start, and then we're gonna transition over to where we're actually at the Mad Scientist home laboratory with the Killin It Mega Truck, and we're about partially through the Killin It Resurrection process. So check out what I got going on here. I know it's a little bit hokey, but honestly, it ain't stupid if it works. So what I did is I ran plumb bob strings from the bottom of my steps, because the steps are obviously straight with the truck, and that will keep everything kind of tight and uniform looking. So I got two string lines going across the truck unobstructed, and then I got a chalk line here that I ran from the back of the truck, actually my hitch, and then I ran it all the way up, wrapped it around there. And then I kept on adjusting it, moving that up and down, and then I actually put the level across my subframe so that I could slide it up and down to kind of adjust that side of the string, and kept screwing with it. God, it sucked. I'm sure there's an easier way to do it, because that was a pain right in the ball bag for sure. But I kept adjusting it until those two strings are the same distance away from the red string. So I have basically a red string that mimics the plane that my step bars are on. So that red string is exactly in the same plane. So then I measured up from that red string up to that cross member right there. And then I also measured from that string back here up to that cross member right there. And those are the two cross members that we're gonna be attaching this rack onto. Come to find out, those two cross members are 3/8 of an inch difference if you're going just like going from the plane of the truck to the bottom of that bar, so they sit a little bit different. There are also different diameter tubes as well. Like that's a 3-inch tube, and that one's a 2.37 is what it measures. So it's like 2 3/8, what Brian was saying. So, bam! Now I've got dimensions for the Mad Scientist to be able to go ahead and start sketching this thing up on his computer. Whew. That freaking sucked. That was a lot of work. But you know what? It freaking worked though. So from that point, I knew for sure all three coolers would fit, so I went ahead and got them ordered from Mr. Daniel over at Mid-Arc Off-Road, and I can go ahead and start sketching up the cooler rack. All right, y'all, we made it over to the Mad Scientist home laboratory, and I actually had to finish up button up some wiring from when we were doing the center console. I had to put some Deutsch connectors on a few things that I didn't put Deutsch connectors on before when we were doing it. But I also did this. I went ahead and started mocking up the rack that's gonna hold those three coolers. So one, I'm not sure which one's which. I got to look at the numbers because the orifices inside of them are different size. But one of them is going to be for engine oil. Another one's going to be for transmission fluid. The other one's going to be for power steering fluid. But I started kind of mocking it all up a little bit, just laying it out. I've got to go through and so I got to cope each one of these pipes so they actually lock into one another. I think I'm going to have to cut a little short piece of pipe to put here. And these are pretty bitchin'. So I got this idea from the Mad Scientist. What this is a roll bar mount or roll cage mount. So it's so that he actually has these in his truck. I can show you. Hang on one second. He's got them right there. So basically what that is, it's a really rigid and robust mount for using on a roll cage, so that you can do exactly that. So you can kind of remove part of it, so that he was able to powder coat his. He was able to like take it out of the truck, and it still is just as strong as if you had regular pipe there. So what I'm gonna use them for though, is so that we can go through and build this whole rack to be able to hold these coolers, and then it will be removable. So like the one end of these will be mounted to the frame of the truck, and the other end will be mounted to the cooler rack, so that I just take those freaking Allen screws out, and then the whole rack will come out. So I've got two to be able to go for, because that's gonna be sitting basically vertical to the truck. And then these are gonna be gussets that will kind of go like this, and those will also go to the frame of the truck as well. And so I'll be able to just take the Allen screws out, and the whole rack will be able to come right out of the truck. I don't know that I'm gonna powder coat it, because that is part of the benefit, is you can take it out and powder coat it. I think I'm probably still gonna just end up painting it with that Emron black paint like I did the undercarriage of the truck with. But it still will be super freaking convenient, because we can build the whole rack, and then I can just spray just the rack. I don't have to have the whole truck in a paint booth trying to spray the whole damn thing. I will need to spray it, like repaint the areas where we weld those mounts to the truck frame itself, but not that big a deal. I can just kind of dust that in. I mean, there'll be a small little bracket and a little area where I had to grind some paint off to be able to do the weld, but it's so damn minor, I'll be able to just tape it off and just probably spray it right here in his shop. So it won't be that big of a deal. But the whole rack, that would be kind of a process. I'd have to I probably would have to mask off the whole damn truck just to paint that little rack, to where with it being removable, be able to freaking go ahead and just paint it like right inside of a paint booth. Not a big deal at all. But I went ahead and cut all the pipe pieces and kind of laid it all together. Got my super bitchin' spike ends. I think that was kind of a neat little feature, little add to it. They're freaking sharp as hell. I might have to grind the tip off them a little bit, because they're like ridiculously sharp. It's like a freaking shark hook. But yeah, that's kind of what we're going for though. We would hold all three racks, or all three coolers on one rack. Sorry, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning right now. So I'm gonna call it an evening, and we will reconvene tomorrow, because I'm gonna come here and keep working away on the truck. So see you in a couple seconds. See y'all. All right, y'all, we're freaking back at it. So feeling really good. Got recharged last night, got a little bit of sleep. Freaking go time, oh brother. So I grabbed a couple more pieces of steel from R&D Concepts. I'll show you when I get back to Brian's house. I'll show you why I needed to grab those. I realized it late last night right as I was leaving. But so I got those couple pieces, and then also now I'm running down to our good buddy Steve, guy that does a lot of the welding for us on the Killin It Mega Truck. I'm running over to his house because he actually has Brian's Notch Master, I think that's what it's called, or a Coat Master. It allows you to be able to coat the pipes so that you can take circular tubing or round tubing and have it made up to one another and not look super goofy. So I'm headed on over to Steve's house so we can cope a couple of these pipes, and then I can get back to Brian's house and start kind of mocking this thing together, this new freaking rack for all of our freaking super banging new Duramax coolers. So let's get over to Steve's house and get it knocked out. All right, well, I just got to Mr. Steve's shop, and it's actually a little bit loud in there, so I can't really explain while I'm in there. But basically what I'm doing, I'm using the Notch Master, and I'm achieving that. So the reason for that is so that when these pipes come together, they come together nice and purty like that. See, look at how sick that is. And then we just weld that up. So to achieve it, basically what it is, it's like a hole saw that's all in a vise and locked in with a drill. And it's actually very genius design in the way that tool works. And it's super cool how it makes that pipe so bitchin' like that. So, but all it is it kind of locks this pipe into place. And then you've got your drill. I'll show you the tool here in a second. But it just kind of hole saws that piece in there so that bam, locks in just like that. Super freaking banging. Bam, not too much to it. Pretty cool. Just run the freaking drill. Bam, cuts the hole right in the pipe. Super freaking bitchin'. And then that is the end result. So I already did these two. Now I just got to put a 45 on this piece and on that piece. Okay, y'all, now that I got all those tubes, they're all coped and everything so they can go together. The next step of making this cooler rack process is going to be to drill some holes in these pieces of flat bar that I already cut a long time ago. And this is actually what the cooler is going to mount to. It's what they're going to bolt to. So I got to drill holes. I've marked out where the slot is, where one of them is going to be able to sit. So I've got to measure that, mark it, center punch it, and then drill holes in for the whole cooler to actually through bolt to these plates. So got them all here though. So I got to measure exactly where this is, make sure it's centered. Take my handy dandy little punch, and then over to the drill press we go. All right, y'all, now that we're back at the Mad Scientist home laboratory, now I went ahead and took those plates and started bolting them onto the coolers. You look right here, they all fit nice and pretty. So now that I know they all fit and I didn't goof up doing the holes at all, I'm gonna take off each one, use the grinder here, clean up the edges, hit this with a little whirly bird, this little tool right here. You just put it inside the hole and then whoosh, and it takes off the edge right there, that little burr. I'm gonna do that to each of these plates, and then I'm gonna go ahead and start mocking this whole thing up so we can see exactly how this rack's gonna lay out. I mean, that's basically kind of, you guys got a pretty good idea of what it's gonna be like, but I'm gonna start kind of probably tack and welding it together. And then I also need to take each one of my pipes here and clean up the ends of them so that they are ready to accept some welds. So let's set the time, let's camera up and frickin' get to it, y'all. Mother frickin' party time, I tell you that. All right, y'all. Well, I think we officially have everything prepped. Now it's time to start tacking it all together. So let me show you kind of, I think you got a pretty good idea of what's going on here, but let me show you. So what's going to happen here. So I did run into a little bit of a challenge as I started putting this together and it really started fitting. I knew it was going to be like nut to butt, like super tight, but didn't know it was going to be quite this tight. So when I looked up the schematics for these coolers back when I bought them and when I drew my whole rack thing here in my super bitchin' binder with all of my freaking motor crap in it, when I did that, the schematic that they gave me of these coolers, it did not accommodate for these ears here. So that added like, I don't know, like probably an inch or so to everything, give or take. Let me get a tape measure. I don't know for sure. About 7/8 of an inch. So that 7/8 of an inch was not accounted for when I did all this and didn't realize it was gonna be that tight till I started laying it all out. But I think I found a way around it. Mad Scientist just came over here and actually kind of gave his insight as well. Originally, I was gonna have these tabs, these are 9-inch tabs. I was gonna have these sit in between here and here where this X is. And then my pipe would sit between here and here. And then again, another tab, and then another pipe with a 1-inch gap on either side of the pipes. But then the final tab, and then I'd have 1 more inch before the end of the rack. Well, luckily I put that extra inch in there because that will accommodate that 7/8 of an inch. So what I'm thinking I'm gonna do, I'm gonna sneak the tabs out all the way to the end. It'll still look all right. And we'll still have our super bitchin' spike here. So I think, yeah, I mean, no harm, no foul. I think it'll actually work out all right. And then the only other thing I'll have to adjust a little bit is I'm gonna have to find the difference. It probably would be a 1/2 inch, I think. But basically I'm gonna have to end up moving these crossmember pipes over just a little bit because I need them to wind up in the center of these two coolers and or actually in the center of this cooler and the center of those two. Because when this cooler rack is up and mounted the way it's going to, it's gonna mount to the frame of the truck up here. And then I've got these pipes that I've got all prepped with 45s on them. These are gonna go right in between, I think. Yeah, where's the happy spot? Like right about there. So they're gonna sit on that center crossmember pipe, and those are gonna reach out and touch the truck frame as well. So that way it's got like a 45 to it. So it'll kind of look like this. So that way there's no way this thing will go anywhere. It'll be rock solid. So I've got to do a little bit of accommodating to accommodate for these tabs. I wish they would have freaking put those in the drawing, but whatever, not the end of the world. So I'm gonna go ahead and start tacking this stuff up though. I'm gonna start with this tab and just work my way down. I'll tack this tab on first and then move to this tube. Yeah, and I'll just work my way down the line and then I'll go ahead and tack that side. We'll probably be ready to rock and roll. These, I don't need to tack these in. We'll just weld these in probably at the end. So that's where we're at. Mega truck life is full of freaking little hurdles, ain't it? Every time I turn around, a little hurdle here, little hurdle. It's like you're mud bogging all the time. Every time you're trying to work on the mega truck, it's like you're mud bogging again because you're coming across the different holes. Anyways, let's freaking get to tacking, y'all. Y'all, well, I don't know if you could tell from that little time lapse, but I was getting a little freaking frustrated because I kept on screwing around with this damn rack and kept tacking it up, getting it all to where I thought it was good. I'd put a little bit of heat on it, start tacking it. As soon as I put a little bit of weld on it, it would pull it one direction or the other. And being a perfectionist with this freaking stuff like I am really can be your detriment. It can really be a pain right in the ball bag because it's really hard to get this stuff perfect. So I end up cutting it all apart 2 different times, and then trying to tack it again, and then I get off kilter again, and it wouldn't be like totally bad. It just a couple things would be off a little bit, and then as I progressed through like getting it tacked up, it would just get worse and worse. Like everything would start to exaggerate one another. So this would be a little crooked, and then this would be a little crooked. So then with both those things being crooked, it would cause the next thing to be really crooked. So I'm like, so I had to cut all this shit apart like 2 different times. Finally, I got a different game plan on like how I was going to go through and like strategically tack things to where it would make sense and wouldn't be a problem. As I got all laid on the table, guess who freaking swooped in at the opportune moment? Keep telling y'all, freaking my hyena says it all the time. Life's all about timing. Freaking guess who comes up? Freaking mad scientist. Came over, was able to actually, right as I got everything pretty much laid out the way I wanted, I was able to kind of hold it. We tacked it together, and then he came over and threw some super bitchin' beads on her. And she's looking pretty good. She's, oh, mother freaking point. Y'all want to see? It looks pretty good. I'm going to show you. You want to see? I'll show you. Let's check it out. Bam! Now that's a cooler rack if I done ever seen one. Brian hates these freaking spike tube ends, but I think they look so cool, especially when they get painted. Everything kind of matches. That looks super bitchin'. Don't tell me it don't. So let me, I've got all the coolers sitting right on over here, so let me bolt those back onto it real quick, and then you'll get a real feel for what this is going to look like. So give me just a couple seconds. All right, y'all. Well, that took a little bit longer than I thought because I went ahead and spent a few minutes and got all the freaking welding dingleberries off this thing, so it's all nice and clean, but it's pretty freaking cool. Check this freaking thing out. Now that is a damn Killin It cooler rack if I done ever seen one. Hell yeah. Thing is super freaking bitchin'. So now I'm going to take it on over to the Mega Truck and start mocking up exactly how it's going to go. Now there was a little change in design that the mad scientist and I actually just figured out a little bit ago. Originally, well here, let me get over to the Mega Truck and I'll show you what I was talking about. Bear with me momentarily. Un momento, por favor. So as I think I had told y'all before, here, let me back up so you can kind of see where the hell we're at. So we're underneath the Mega Truck, okay? So going underneath right where the fuel tank is, I'm gonna use these 2 factory mounts, or the factory cross members, one right here and one right there. Those are what actually hold the fuel tank in. And originally what I was gonna do is kind of hard to get it to where y'all can see. So I was originally gonna run it right next to the freaking fuel tank. It was gonna run parallel to it, basically go kind of right against the fuel tank. And I was gonna put the fans on, what was I gonna do? Let me think for a second. I was gonna put the fans on that side, and then I was gonna have him push the air through them. So that way, and then I can always and then I have access to where it could get plugged up with mud. I could always spray it with water and everything. Well, once I went and held the cooler rack, once I went and held the rack up there, we started having some second thoughts about running it that way.
Here's why. Here's what the different options. I took pictures of them because I can't do all this and hold the camera. So I got one picture where it's like this, one picture where it's at an angle, and another one where it's horizontal. Okay, see, so we actually kind of were deciding how we want to do it. So I sent all those pictures over to Mr. Daniel over at Mid-Arc Off-Road. He's actually the guy that hooked us up with all those Duramax coolers because he's a dealer for them. Remember I said earlier, if y'all want some Duramax coolers, make sure you hit up Mid-Arc Off-Road. Talk to Daniel Roberts, he'll get you taken care of. And there's other dealers too, but he's definitely the most super bitched one. Let's be honest, come on, he's the one who hooked up the Killin It crew, bro. But anyways, I sent those pictures to him to see like, hey, what do you think about how to run these? And he really said it comes down to how you want it to look. And he said there's a couple different factors. It's basically everything that I'm thinking, like how you want it to look and functionality. He's thinking that really I should put more emphasis on functionality than I am look. So when I held it up there, as you can tell for those pictures, that thing hangs down pretty damn good. So Mad Scientist and I were a little concerned that might become an eyesore because it's hanging down so far. We don't want a big honking cooler rack like hanging down in the subframe. It takes away from the cleanliness and like the way everything kind of looks nice underneath here. So ran that by Mr. Daniel, and Daniel thinks basically concurs with that mental process. Yeah. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna run it horizontally. Remember, originally, like I said, we're gonna run it vertically, like right next to the fuel tank. We're gonna run it horizontally. So they're basically gonna be like this. We're gonna have the fan on top and then have it be open underneath them. That way I can get to the bottom to be able to spray it off if I get mud on it. And realistically, when I'm hitting mud holes, even when I'm getting a little rowdy and hitting them a little fast, you don't really get a whole lot of clumped mud underneath the middle of the truck. I have noticed that. Like the way our subframe is, I got this big ass 1/2-inch thick plate that runs right across just to kind of give the entire frame a little more stability and a little more structure. And I don't really ever have an issue with tons of mud being clumped up on top of there. It does get like a little film of mud on it, maybe a little bit of debris, but for the most part, it stays all right. So I'm thinking the same should happen with our coolers. So the next step that I'm going to do is get the transmission jack, which is still here from when we pulled the transmission out. I'm gonna snake that over. That's gonna be kind of fun to do. But I'm gonna snake that underneath here and get it to where it's sitting underneath the truck. And then I'm gonna jack that transmission jack up a good little bit and then set that cooler rack on it so we can really see exactly how it's gonna mount. And I gotta get an idea on how long of tubes I need to cut, because I'm gonna have tubes coming off of the rack. Like the rack's gonna be sitting here like this. I'm gonna have pipes or tubes coming off of the rack going upward. And then I'm gonna have those little tube clamps, the same thing that the Mad Scientist has on his roll cage. I'm gonna put those tube clamps in there and then another piece of pipe that will go to this cross member. So that will make it to where I can just take out those couple screws that go on that tube clamp and the whole entire rack will be removable. To make it much easier for serviceability, I just gotta disconnect all the Deutsch connectors I'm gonna have on all of the different fans and disconnect the lines, and then I can pull that whole rack down. But the rack will be able to come off, and it's also, let's be honest, it's gonna make it a hell of a lot easier when it comes to painting it. I won't have to bring the whole truck into a paint booth and bag the whole damn thing off in order just to paint that little rack. So that's what I'm doing now. So give me a second to move all this crap around, move the transmission jack and get the cooler rack set up and everything, and then we'll reconvene. All right, y'all, after some careful zip tie maneuverability, I think I've got where the new cooler rack is gonna live. You wanna see it? Check this out. Bam! I think that looks pretty bitchin'. Nice and clean. I think that's where she's gonna go. Though I talked to Mr. Daniel, he thinks, like I said earlier, it's gotta go horizontal. He thinks that's the best route. I am kind of thinking, I do have an idea now that I've got it up here. I might try to build or like weld up some kind of grate or some kind of like shield. Probably like just a couple bars, like maybe like, I'm thinking like maybe like a piece of flat bar and then like 4 rods that'll run across. Very simple design, but just basically like a cage almost, just to protect from any like big debris coming up and whacking this and screwing up these nice, pretty looking coolers. And I'm also a little bit concerned if the drive shaft was to ever break, that is gonna come up and whack that cooler too. So that's another reason why. I don't know, I'm gonna run all that by the Mad Scientist though, because I mean, the idea does sound good, but depending on what material we use, I mean, it needs to be strong enough that it will actually stop something from hitting it. If I just use like thin material, it's not gonna really do a whole lot. It'll look like it'll do something, but it won't actually hold up to anything. So I don't know exactly yet, but that's what we're working with, y'all. Pretty freaking cool if I say so myself. And then all the lines are all on this side. They'll all run out of it and run right down the frame up to the front of the truck. There's lines for the transmission, lines for the oil, and lines for the power steering. Give you another little look from up front. We can't go too far forward because of the transfer case and all, but yeah, that's what I'm thinking, y'all. And then from the side profile, you really won't even see it. I mean, you might see a little bit if you're looking for it. You can kind of see it in there, but for the most part, if you're just kind of chilling, like from a little distance away, you'll never even know that that thing was there. Bam, totally hidden. Pretty cool, pretty motherfucking cool. But that's gonna go ahead and wrap up for tonight. I'm gonna call it an even because it's getting a little late. I got work early in the morning, and I will reconvene tomorrow. Probably gonna start cutting some tubing and figuring out exactly what we gotta do to be able to make those tube adapters for, you know, to be able to go up and attach to the truck. So we'll reconvene tomorrow, y'all. See ya. Y'all, now that the cooler rack is basically fabricated, now it's time to move on to some electrical to be able to power the fans that are going to be on these coolers. So very similar to that bracket that I made that's underneath the center console. Got, again, another piece of flat bar. And then I got myself a little fuse holder. Gonna sit right here-ish. And then I got a couple relays, some of the more of those super bitchin' ones from the Mad Scientist. And what I'm going to do is basically kind of mount it like that. It's going to look all nice. Hopefully it's going to look all nice and measured out in uniform though. And these are going to be the 3 relays that are going to turn on or operate the 3 cooling fans that are going to be on the 3 coolers, the Duramax coolers that are going to go underneath the truck. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure it out, and then I'm going to drill. This is 1/4 inch material. So I'm going to go ahead and drill and tap holes to be able to put a mounting bolt in the tops of each of these relays. And then drill and tap some holes to be able to mount this fuse holder right here. And then I'm probably going to put a couple clamps in here like I did that one that was underneath the console, so it kind of makes everything look tight and pretty. Be able to run the wiring over here. And then, yeah, I got to think of how this is going to work. Might actually have to mount this like this. Yeah, it might make more sense to mount this actually like this. And then I'll have this up this. Yeah, that's probably what we'll do. Mount this like this. And then I'll have wires going right in here to their each individual fuses. And then I'll have the actual wire that goes to the device or goes to the cooler will come right down, and it'll go out the toolbox down to the bottom of the truck where those coolers are going to be mounted on that rack. Then I'll just have one hot wire feeding all this. And then, yeah, I'll splice all these grounds together. So that's what I'm doing. So let me get to it. As luck would have it, the time-lapse camera is over at, oh, is it? Yeah, time-lapse camera is over at the Mad Scientist shop. But there's not a whole lot to this. I kind of explained what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead, drill, measure, tap these holes and everything, and then I'll show you guys what we're working with afterwards. Most of this video is me freaking talking anyway, so let me get to fabbing, and then I'll give you guys an update here shortly. Guess what, y'all? We got a new freaking component for the Killin It Mega Truck. Oh, brother. I'm a little bit tired, but we freaking made it happen. Y'all want to see it? It's pretty freaking cool. Let's see if I can spin it. All right, ready? Ooh, brother. Yeah, that thing's kind of freaking bitching, huh? Dale, yeah. I'm going to bring my face to the camera. So, we got the relays for the oil cooler, for the transmission cooler, and for the power steering cooler. Got them all fused. I already got my main line, so I just got to connect that to the batteries inside the toolbox. And then I got the relays all, like, obviously, like, organized up. So then I just got to run each of the wires that goes to each of those coolers. The main trigger wire goes on that blue one, and then the ground for all those relays goes on the black one. But bam! And then I got my mounting screws up here in the corners. So basically what's going to happen is this is going to go right inside the toolbox. I'm thinking like right in between those two subwoofers that I have in there. It'll go right on that back wall. So it'll be nice and accessible, right out of the way. I was going to kind of tuck it like back behind the batteries and stuff, but it's like, dude, I keep freaking doing that. And then it's a pain in the ass to get to everything. So instead I'm going to do it like right out in the open. It'll be super easy to get to, especially because these are going to be quite important because they're the coolers to keep the Killin It Mega Truck from getting overheating again. So, but yeah, that's our finished product. Freaking pretty sick, huh? I think it came out pretty good. I'm very happy with it. So I'm going to call it a night for this evening, but tomorrow I'm going to get this installed in the toolbox and then run the wires to it. I'm going to run like the trigger wire, run the ground, run the positive to it, and then I'm going to run each of those individual wires down to where that cooler rack that I was explaining earlier is going to go. So another freaking step closer, y'all. Hoorah! So I'll check back with y'all tomorrow. See ya. All right, y'all, so we're back at it again. Freaking super killing it. I worked actually pretty late on it last night too, but I didn't really film nothing because kind of like what was happening when I was doing the interior, a lot of tight quarters, and I would have been moving the camera every 5 seconds to show y'all what the hell was going on. But now that I did a lot of it, I can show y'all what I was doing. Let's hop back in here. So remember my super banging toolbox, it's got all kinds of Killin It goodies in it. Let me open this up. Bam! That freaking panel that I made to power all the coolers that are gonna go into the truck, got it all mounted up. Got it basically wired. The only things I still gotta run the trigger wire. I'm actually in the process of doing that right now. Running it from the front of the truck, down the frame rail, up into the toolbox, and that's gonna tie in to these 3 wires. That's gonna trigger all 3 relays, which will trigger all 3 cooling fans, which would be the transmission cooler, oil cooler, and the power steering cooler. I already ran the hot lead to my bus bar that I've got back there, hooked up to these batteries. Obviously, I don't have any fuses in it, and the batteries are all disconnected. But did all that, and then I also ran each of the 3 power wires that are going to be powering the fans, ran them off of this panel. They go down this way, go down through the bottom of the bed, through the toolbox, down through the bottom of the bed, and I've actually got them all just kind of draped down right there to the back of the truck for right now. Once we get all the fabrication done for that rack that's going to hold those 3 coolers, and once we kind of got everything dialed in, got to get everything painted, a lot of steps to the process before I can actually put the wiring over to the coolers. But it's all down there, so it's accessible. It's on the back of the truck. As soon as we get the coolers dialed in and located, bam, can run the power to them, and they'll be ready to rock and roll. All right, y'all, well, we have made some damn good progress on the cooler rack. She is looking on point and a half, let me tell you. She's pretty much all welded up as far as the actual rack herself goes. Now we're going to take it on over to the truck. It's back over yonder, and pardon me, I got crap all over myself. It's because I was grinding all the paint off my truck where we've got a weld onto the crossman right. Look, I was sniffing poo. All right, so I got to bring the rack over here because right where I ground the paint off, right there, and there, I think is where that rack should ideally sit. So now I'm going to bring it over, zip tie it up in here so we can weld her up. So let me get the rack in here, and we'll reconvene in a second. But we're getting super close to having the cooler rack done. So let me put her up there. So the next step is to go ahead and fab up that protective grate that will ideally protect those coolers. In the event I get a little froggy and we get some debris flying up at those coolers, it'll keep that debris from damaging those coolers and inevitably making all my fluid leak out, making me lose all my transmission fluid, all my power steering fluid. So I'm heading over to pick up some expanded metal and some flat bar. Then we're gonna head back over to the Mad Scientist Home Laboratory and get to fabricating, brother. Well, y'all, as you can tell, we got that rack all dialed in, and yeah, drilled a couple holes that we needed in it to be able to attach the protective grate that'll keep those coolers from getting all
damage in the event that I get a little froggy and start wrecking into some freaking mud holes a little faster than expected. Maybe get some debris come up and hit those coolers. So hopefully this grate will protect it, because that'll bolt right onto the face of it. So now that we've got everything kind of mocked up, or not mocked up, but welded up, it's basically fabricated, ready to rock. Brought it on over here to our good buddies at Dracon Coatings. Gonna hit us up with some sandblasting so we can get some fresh paint on her. All right, y'all. Well, I just got the freaking call from Dracon Coatings. Sounds like our cooler rack is all sandblasting and ready for some freaking primer and paint. It's time to pick her up. And would you look at that? Freaking super banging. Only thing missing is a little bit of primer and paint. She's ready to go on the truck and get some coolers added. Freaking next stop, paint shop, bruh. All right, y'all. Sorry, I started working and forgot to give you all a little update. So the paint is obviously dry on our cooler rack. Ooh, she looks good. Huh? Yeah, oh yeah, real freaking deal. So I just set all of the coolers on it and started putting the bolts in. Yeah, that emerald paint came out very nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and start bolting all the coolers on. And then after the coolers are all bolted on, then the next step, I gotta kind of lift it up. And then I've got that protective grate that I welded up a few nights ago. That's got nice fresh paint on it too. It's all nice and dry. It's been sitting here for a couple days. So this is gonna come off and then it'll bolt through these holes. This hole in each corner of it. It'll through bolt onto that rack with the outside coolers, the outside, like outer coolers. So I'm gonna assemble all that, get it together, and then get her up on the truck and then start running the wiring to it, because then I've got all the fittings here. Back the camera up a little bit. So then I got all the fittings on here. This was gonna be, so there was, I'll go back up a little bit. So this is for the power steering fluid, this is for the transmission fluid, and this was gonna be for the engine oil, but I'm getting a little spooked on running engine oil through this cooler. Let me explain why. The reason why is our boy, Mr. Riley, with the twin turbo Duramax race truck that we went for the rip in at Iron Horse, actually at the same event that I blew my motor in. Me and him been keeping in super close touch. He's actually been super instrumental in helping us figure all this stuff out, how everything should be routed, what compound turbo kit. He's helped me out a ton, giving me advice on what to run. But he reached out to me a couple days ago, maybe it was like last week. He's like, hey man, he already knows about this whole cooler rack situation and kind of what I was trying to do. He's like, man, you might not want to run your engine oil through one of those coolers, because he goes, I know they're saying that there's no restriction in that cooler and everything, but he is very instrumental in the truck pull world, like where they do the sled pulling. And apparently one of his boys was running a Duramax engine. This happened a couple different times, a couple different engines. And he was trying to run an engine oil cooler, similar setup like I'm doing. I don't know if it was necessarily one of these Raleigh coolers or not, but similar cooler. And it freaking kept starving the engine of oil and burning out his main bearing, which means your engine's got to come out and you got to take it all apart. Not good. Basically, you blew your motor. So I definitely do not want to have those problems. So he's kind of thinking, and also the mad scientist and Mr. Darrell, we're all kind of on the same page, kind of thinking that maybe what I should do instead, run this engine with its standard oil cooler without all this excessive lines and this extra Duraleigh cooler. I'm still going to leave the Duraleigh cooler on the rack, have it up in the truck, and eventually I'll plumb into it if I ever want to, if I start having problems with engine temperatures. But I'm thinking for now, we're just going to leave the standard oil cooler that's on the block of the engine. It's a L5P. It's already an upgraded oil cooler from what was on the original LMM engine. Let me show you real quick. It's, well, it's kind of hard to see right now, but it's like right up back in there. That's super, you probably see it from under here. Oh yeah, there we go. That is an L5P oil cooler. So it's a little bit more efficient than the standard LMM. They kind of advanced a little bit over the years. So Socal Diesel had supplied us with that oil cooler. And I guess Mr. Raleigh is going to run the same oil cooler on his new engine, because he decided to get a little froggy at Iron Horse Mud Ranch, and now he's been dealing with some engine challenges himself. You also go on his Instagram page. His Instagram page is Dirty Looks SMS, I believe is what it is. So on there, you can kind of follow along with what he's got going on. But anyways, he's going to run that same oil cooler, that same L5P oil cooler, and he's pretty convinced that he's going to be fine, and he runs his truck a bit harder than I run mine. So if he's going to be fine, I should be fine too. So that's what's going on with the cooler rack, though. I'm going to go ahead and bolt these on, get the grate on, get it up in the truck, and then that's originally where I was at with my story. Now that I've got all these fittings that are on each of the coolers, I'll be able to go through it and get exact measurements of exactly how long these tubes need to be, or these hoses need to be. Need to be from here all the way up to where it connects into the power steering pump or in the transmission. So I gotta get all this mounted so I can get those lengths. So that is what we're doing. And we're off. as you can probably tell, that damn cooler rack is a little bit on the heavy side, particularly with all those freaking coolers on it. Yeah, I tried lifting it up like 3 or 4 different times, and it wasn't so much that it was heavy getting up there, but with all the fresh paint that we had on those roll bar clamps, they don't really slide in as good as they should, as good as they did without the freaking paint on them. So usually you got to kind of force them to lock in, at least your first couple times, putting them in and out with the fresh paint on them to get some of that paint to scoot out of the way so that clamp will actually tighten up the way it should. So I actually ended up waiting a couple days so there was some more people at the Mad Scientist home laboratory where I could get some people to help me lift that cooler rack in there, and then we could use a little bit longer screws to get those clamps to go ahead and snug shut. But once I did that, I went ahead and got measurements so I could get all the lines made up, and went ahead and connected all the Deutsch connectors on the lines that I ran down to the frame area, and also put Deutsch connectors on the actual fans themselves, and got all wired up and connected. So without further ado, why don't we check out the finished product, y'all? And there she is, y'all. Our super bitchin', super killing it cooler rack. Oh, baby. So as I told you all a few times, I capped off the oil cooler. I'm not using it quite yet. If I decide I need to start using it, the cooler's there and ready to be used. Or if I decide I need to use it for something else, it's there, ready to rock and roll. I already ran all the electrical to it. I just took the fuse out of this lead, so that way it's not constantly turning on unnecessarily. So it's basically just sitting here taking up space, looking nice and pretty. But then we've got our transmission cooler right here, and then we've got our power steering cooler. Got all the hydraulic lines made. I used really badass hardcore hydraulic lines for everything. So I've got some of the lines. These are for the power steering. They go up over the truck, over up to the front where the power steering pump is and where the orbital valve is. The other bigger lines, these guys right here, go up to the transmission. They run right along this frame rail, and they pop out right there where the factory transmission cooler used to hook up. I just got these connectors online where you switch these over from taking the hard lines. Instead, they take AN fittings, and we're ready to rock and roll. Bam! Transmission's gonna stay super cool. And apparently this cooler is a lot more efficient than the factory setup anyway, so we're ready to rock and roll. Got our grate installed. I used some standoff bolts. That way it's not actually rubbing or hitting. That freaking grate worked out perfectly. Should keep us from ever damaging those coolers. And yeah, not too bad if I say so my mother freaking self. Very nice and clean. Definitely can dig it. And then as I told y'all back when I was doing all the wiring, I've got that whole fuse set up in my toolbox, nice and accessible. And then everything comes on with the ignition. But in the event we are sitting still and don't want to be having them running, they're right here on this aux fan switch. So all I gotta do is have the switch in the off position like it is right now. Bam! And we don't have any coolers running, wasting our battery power while we're trying to play our stereo. And keep up with Mr. Bo, Mr. AJ, Mr. Carlos playing our freaking stereo. So another part of the Killin' It Resurrection, boom, boom, in the motherfucking books, y'all. So that's gonna be a wrap on the cooler rack fabrication part of our Killin' It Resurrection series. As always, make sure you hit the like button at the bottom of the screen, hit the subscribe button down there in my channel name. That way you'll get notified anytime we upload any other videos. So hope you all enjoyed the video. Hope you all learned a little something. And as always, thanks for watching, y'all. If you all enjoyed the video and want to check out future videos, subscribe to our channel. Hit that button right there. While you're at it, hit the like button at the bottom of your screen. You can also check out our website, killin'itlifestyle.com. There you can follow the Killin' It crew and order your own apparel so everyone will know you're killing it!